Normally smart people of Reddit. What is the dumbest thing you've ever done? Story 1. Okay, so several years ago I worked in a craft store. When we were going through the aisles cleaning up, we were supposed to grab any damaged items and put them in a specific bin. At the end of the night, the manager would kind of quickly go through it just to make sure everything in there was in fact damaged. So the one night she's digging through it and pulls out a wooden E. "Who put this in here?" she asked. I said I did. She asked why. I told her, "It's supposed to be an E but it's missing one of the prongs." My manager stared at me for a few moments before informing that it was in fact an F. Story 2. Took a quick break at work and went to get a drink. Stupid brain went on autopilot and I drove home not that far, walked in, took off work shirt, plopped on couch, turned on TV, wondered where my girlfriend was cause she's usually home when I get off work, looked up at clock, realized I had 3 hours left on shift. Cursed a bunch, got up, put shirt back on, grabbed soda, and went back to work. Story 3. I thought that all rocks became magnetic underwater, because when I dropped them under the surface, they would fall onto the bigger rock floor, as if they were being pulled magnetically. Took me a good 3 hours to realize gravity existed, not my proudest moment. Story 4. I was curious to read an article with a paywall on Wall Street Journal that talked about PewDiePie being a racist or some, and signed up for a free trial thinking I would be fancy and read Wall Street Journal for a month. I might even become one of those droll who starts talking about informative articles I read in the journal or whatever. Naturally, I would cancel my membership before the end of the month. Well, I never read another article during that month, and went 6 months before I remembered to cancel my membership, so essentially, I paid $200 to read one article about how a YouTuber ID never even watched a video of before said some dumb this one time. Story 5. I was once eating delicious table grapes and asked my wife and her friends why haven't they made booze out of these. I thought I had invented wine, and we drink a lot of wine. They were kind of shocked and still tease me about it. Story 6. I used to work at a tea store. At the end of the day, we had to fill a big sink in the back room and wash out all the tea makers we used during the day plus the Fetco, sampler jugs, etc. So, I turned on the sink to fill, then went about some other duties, as per usual. Half an hour later, a cold feeling of dread hits me as I realize I forgot about the sink, flooded the back room. Took me an hour to clean up. At least I'm not the only person who has done that. Story 7. Wander into the bathroom of a very old antique store and take a. Once I finished I realized I was in a storage closet with antique bathroom fixtures, none of which were hooked up to plumbing. Story 8. I was at the zoo buying a fountain pop from the cafe when the staff didn't give me a straw. I asked for one and he said that they do not give out straws due to the free roaming animals on the zoo ground. I asked, how am I supposed to drink this? Without breaking eye contact, he took the drink and removed the plastic lid. Story 9. Not sure if this counts. Up until my freshman year of college, I thought that red, green, purple. Boy did I feel like shite when I discovered this in my chemistry class by arguing with a textbook, a chemist, and a classroom full of people. Story 10. Taken the bus home 45-minute ride, then get home and think my car is stolen for a second before I realize I in fact drove to work. The sad thing is I've done it more than once, more than twice even. Story 11. I was on the phone with my boss. He was asking me if I was at work, yet I said no I wasn't. He asked me why not. I said I couldn't find my phone. He said, "Sting, do me a favor, look at your hand." I go, "I'm looking for my phone." He said, "Sting, shut the up and look at your hand." So I look at my hand. It's empty. He goes, "No you dumb, look at your another hand." So I then looked at my hand that was holding my phone and I said I found my phone and he said, "Yeah no, now get that to work." Story 12. I was watching television and was completely in awe when I said, "The steering wheel on that car goes all the way around." I honestly don't know what I was thinking at the time or why it fascinated me so much. Story 13. Spent almost an hour searching my house for my phone. While on the phone with my mom, she heard me getting frustrated and throwing things around and asked what's wrong. And I replied, real pissed off, "I can't find my phone anywhere. I have been looking for it the whole time I have been talking to you, oh." Story 14. I was making breakfast one morning and came across a particularly sturdy egg, kept trying to crack it on the side of the pan and it wouldn't break, started hitting it against the counter with increasing force until it straight up exploded in my hand. I don't know how I didn't see that coming. Story 15. I'm left-handed and for some reason, I was using my left foot for the pedals in an automatic car. I struggled to learn to drive because I always felt so uncomfortable in the seat, felt that my right leg had no room and I also found it hard to find control how much pressure I was putting on the pedals. Took my 4 years to work out what I was doing wrong and driving has been much smoother ever since. Story 16. When I was in 3rd grade this kid told me if you make a circle around your chin with your thumb and pointer finger, basically choke it off the circulation and hold it for 30 seconds, then give your chin a firm thump, you'll get a bruise pretty quickly. I did it anyway and then told a bunch of other people in the class and they did it too. We all had huge bruises on our chins in no time. Story 17. Girl in my class had a cool short that had a bunch of little watermelon slices on it. My stupid brain came up with nice melons when I wanted to compliment her. Story 18. Blister was annoying me so I started stabbing it with my long nail. Didn't pop, tried harder, didn't pop, messed with it with my teeth like it was a hangnail. It popped, pus went in my mouth, tasted foul, instinctively rolled car window down I was driving and spat, spit went back across my face, edit blister was on my hand. Story 19. I drink coffee every morning with 1 sugar. It's become pretty habitual. One night I went to make a chocolate milk, poured in the milk, then I went and grabbed the sugar from the cupboard, put a teaspoon of sugar in it, and took me a good 5 seconds to realize what I'd done. Story 20. I was trying to be cool while talking to this girl in college. We were at the student cafeteria where I was working, and while we were in discussion, I accidentally knocked the pizza warmer lamp bulb onto one of the pizzas. It exploded and glass went everywhere. Sigh. Story 21. I'm back again. Once I poured bleach all over my body whilst trying to bleach my hair. About 15 minutes later decided to play hide and seek, so I hid under all the empty, used trash bags my uncle had in the garage without AC in the middle of summer. I broke out all over my body, just a walking ball. Use me as an example when you feel like raising your children as evangelical Pentecostals that expect the rapture to happen before your kid graduates high school. Story 22. Just today, actually, pour chocolate milk, put it upstairs. Memory of putting it upstairs fades off and I go back downstairs. Look for chocolate milk as soon as I turn off brain autopilot as I realize I was grabbing water even though I already had a drink. Look for chocolate milk to no avail. Assume it got sucked into the void. Grab the water, go back up. In room, chocolate milk is there. Story 23. No, wait. Waking up in Kansas City, Missouri after leaving with my drunk driving buddy from Minnesota, or lighting a hay bale on fire trying to smoke pot, or having Roman candle and bottle rocket wars, or BB gun fights. Yes, shooting at each other with pellet guns. Or hooking up the down power lines to the old grain silo to the four-wheeler and then launching ourselves into the air like a roller coaster ride, or destroying the four-wheeler shocks and hitting a homemade jump at full speed. It ended up with me rolling the four-wheeler, giving myself everything and a concussion while watching my dad stop the machine barreling toward my two younger sisters on the trampoline with his bare hands. That's probably why he was able to hit me so hard. Or taking the weird kid out hunting because I felt bad he didn't have friends. He shot at a duck from at least 500 yards away. Shotguns can't shoot that far, and peppering my face with gunpowder while also nearly deafening my right ear. Should I keep going? I am a successful business owner that hates stupid people, probably because I see myself in them. Story 24. Okay, so like I have two that I can remember. 1, a random girl asked me to take her photo at the park, so I agreed and replied with a chill sure. After taking the photo, she thanked me and apologized for being bothersome. I replied her thank you with a no, thank you instead of a you're welcome. At that moment I was like, did I really just say thanks for taking her picture? Please excuse me as I go jump off a cliff. I hate being socially awkward. Edit 1. Wow, everyone's being so nice and wholesome. Never thought it was possible to witness on Reddit. LMFAO. Edit 2. Oh, I have another one. I was in maths class with my best friend and we needed a ruler, compass and protractors. I am in 8th grade. Shut up, everyone was ready and the teacher was asking if she could start demonstrating how to solve the problem. I yelled wait no, I don't have my ruler yet. While frantically looking in my desk and under my table on the floor for the fallen ruler, I noticed my homie Stars laughing at me only to realize that the ruler was in my left hand. The entire time. Oh, how I love being the clown of the class. Needless to say, everyone laughed and I face-bombed so hard I flew to the moon and died. Story 25. I handed up a university paper worth 30 of my overall grade 20 days late because we lost only 2 out of 100 per day that it's late. I wasn't even that busy, but I had already passed the class without that 30, so I just couldn't be. Story 26. When I was a kid, maybe around 12 or so, I wondered what it was like to smoke. My parents were smokers and often had me roll their cigarette for them. Grew up in the 80s where smoking around your kids and all that other dangerous stuff was acceptable. So I had convinced an equally stupid friend that we should go roll a cigarette and smoke it while my parents weren't home. We get the cigarette tubes out in the roller but couldn't find the tobacco. Well, we were intent to smoke that day, so what was the next best thing? Catnip. Awesome idea. Somehow I felt like even more of a rebel. So we rolled the catnip up in a cigarette tube and headed outside with it. I had a trampoline in my backyard, so we get up on it figuring this is the best place to light this thing and give it a try. So with catnip smoke in my mouth I light the thing, and the whole thing was so dry it burnt straight down to my lip in a big flash and sizzled and crackled and almost burned my eyebrows off, and the sparks and ashes fell onto the trampoline and burned a big OL hole right through the middle. So for the longest time after that, whenever my parents were mowing the lawn or out in the yard, I would run out there just to make sure I could be on the trampoline to ensure I could cover the hole so they never saw it. I was teaching a group how to play spoons card game. It's similar to musical chairs, where the amount of spoons in the middle is one less than people playing, so one person gets out each round if they don't get a spoon. After a detailed explanation and a few test rounds, everyone was confident in the game. I lay out the card spoons to begin the first real game, feeling super sure of myself. Minutes later, everyone has a spoon and is circulating the cards. It takes me a good few minutes to realize I've been drawing from both the new deck and discard pile, and that I forgot how to count. Story 27. I was making toast, and once it was finished I was having trouble getting the toast out with my fingers. Then I was like, hey, I'll just use this knife I have here to poke at the toast and get it out, and I was just about to stick the knife into the toaster when I thought, wait a minute, knife toaster bad. Story 28. Looking for a fork with boyfriend. We see where the knives are at, boyfriend reaches for knives. Thinking they are what we need. Me, that's a fork, babe, that's not what we need. Story 29. A bunch of coworkers were talking about getting together for Cinco de Mayo. They asked me if I wanted to join. I said, sure. When is it? That's the day I learned Cinco de Mayo meant May 5th. Story 30. I decided to respond to the Teletubbies demanding payment for being in some photos taken of me by a friend. There was no prior agreement by telling them to off. When they insisted, I decided to fight them, in the middle of Times Square. Story 31 High School Science. I was book smart, as I walk across the room to turn in an assignment when another student says, "Hey, you're smart, can you look at this?" And I turn my head while the projector was on and blinded myself, almost collapsing on the floor. The student said never mind under her breath. I did get 100 though, I remember that. Story 32 Okay, this happens a lot. I mean, like every second time I take off my glasses. What happens is that I take off my glasses to clean them or like change, and then try adjusting them on my face, usually with the glasses in my hand. Story 33 So my work phone's dial out is 91. My first day of work I went to call someone and their number has a 1 at the beginning, meaning it's a US number. I didn't want to mess up and call someone else, so I made sure to include the 1. Then I panicked and hung up. They really don't like when you hang up on 911. Story 34 I was like 10 when this happened. I was with my friends looking for a nice place to go on adventures, and we found a stack of lumber that attracted our attention. Old guy, who owns the lumber, tells us not to climb up there. Or if we do, just be careful. We climb on it anyways. I find a way inside just to get stuck between 2 huge logs. We had to alarm the fire department, and they had to cut me out of there. At that point literally the entire town was across the road watching me. Story 35 I was heating up a pan to make ground beef in. The oil I dumped in started smoking, so I grabbed a paper towel to wipe it out. Yep, hot smoking oil is still hot when it soaks through paper towel, it turns out. Who knew? Story 36 So today I got in trouble because a kid said the F word, and I didn't see any adults around. And I said, you just said the word. I turn around and my friend's mom was behind me and she only heard me. Story 37 Once I wanted to play on my DS few years back, and I spent 10 minutes walking around the house asking my mom where my DS was. It was in my hand the whole time. Story 38 was in 3rd grade. My classmates were all over the place and the teacher talked to some of them. I sat there and wanted to tell the teacher female something, like a reflex. I shouted mama at the top of my lungs. I was really embarrassed, but nobody heard it, my lucky day. Story 39 I have been driving motorcycle for about 20 years now, and as I get older I'm more aware of everything and constantly try to improve my technique, dealing corners and braking hard most of the time. That being said, I have done and seen some of the dumbest things being done with motorcycles. My worst 2 moments involved semi-trucks. When I got my first motorcycle I still was ignorant of how fast can a semi turn. I learned at mid-corner seeing those wheels coming at me. I got through, nothing happened, but man I wet my pants. The other time was when I thought I was driving in what I thought was the longest straight in the country and decided to overtake a semi. By the moment I reached half the semi I saw in the distance another semi coming in opposite direction. My bike was at full throttle and the semi at my right wasn't going to slow down from a semi-drive. Well, you can't see a tiny motorcycle, so instead of slowing down and go back behind the semi I decided to still push. That was so incredible close. To this day that memory comes to me before push it too far on the road. Story 40 I'm sure I've done stupid things and I can't remember, but a friend of mine just walked head-on into my screen door, completely forgot it was there and walked right into it. Story 41 I went home to visit my parents with my 7-month-old son. I parked the car at the ferry terminal, grabbed everything I needed, and off we went. We visited for a few days, then took the ferry home. As we were getting off the ferry I jokingly said to the baby, hopefully mama can find the keys. I searched high and low, through all of our belongings, under the baby, etc. No keys. I called my parents to see if they could find them. No keys. I called Mai to drive the 30 minutes to the ferry with the spare keys. He does. We arrive home safely and I start unloading our bags. That's when I remembered that the day before I had taken the keys out of my pocket and put them in the front part of the diaper bag. While packing up that morning I had put a bottle right on top of them without seeing them. Oops. Story 42 Yesterday, and I've never done this, I got lost. I got lost in a relatively small city. I got so lost that I walked for almost 2 hours in the heat, sweating, and my shoes blistered the back of my feet and blood ran down my ankle. I got so lost I thought I'm not gonna find my way out of here without help. I had no remembered landmarks, no street names, no direction. I'm very good at remembering direction and where I'm at. I'm the guy who gets annoyed at others when they say they don't know where they are. This is the first time I was completely lost. I'm 27, I've been drunk and lost before but eventually remembered where I was and I wasn't worried. This time I was worried, sober, and I was freaking out, so I called the non-emergency line and asked for help. They grabbed me up and found my car on the opposite side of town after about 15 minutes. Best part was I walked almost to it at one point but nothing looked familiar and turned around. I couldn't believe it. I even forgot about a huge landmark. Story 43 Drew A with my friend in the 5th grade, literally right on front of the teacher. Then when she came over I proceeded to very suspiciously flip the page. You can assume what happened next. Story 44 So it happened a few days ago after I went to the public office for some paperwork. I got a phone call asking if I paid my fee because the balance wasn't right. I said maybe it was me but soon realized that I have my receipt, which was impossible if I never paid in the first place. After I called to confirm they said the guy doing the financials made a boo-boo and it was a mistake. Silly me admitting any mistake without thinking. Story 45 I once bragged how we used to fishtail down the gravel roads back home in my Bronco 2. Then I proceeded to fishtail on an icy street and crash my car into a curb, leaving bits of car and a license plate behind in my embarrassment. So to all the people I call retards, idiots, morons, stupid, I am just welcoming you to my personal club. Story 46 I once yelled at my husband with all seriousness, you don't know how to build furniture. Like that's a normal thing to just know. Not everyone has a desire to learn as much about literally everything as I do. You'll never live that one down. Story 47. Starting talking to someone in my favorite tea shop about someone who was A and trying to sue the place for quick cash. Accidentally told this person I know a guy who knows a guy in the mob and could easily have this man's life destroyed or disappeared. TFW, the person who I've been talking to was a cop. Story 48. I have done way too many stupid things to be able to recall my most stupid thing ever. But just today I was converting swim times and I did not realize until probably 40 names and I was putting seconds where minutes should be and milliseconds where seconds should be, and I was writing the times down in pen. Not my proudest moment. Story 49. I was doing a group project in class and the team leader, who happened to be a friend, had me do the diagram. She asked me to draw a square for the outline of it and I straight up circled it. She looked at me confused and asked me if I heard her. I replied with you said draw a square, so I drew the king square. She leaned back in her chair, rubbed her eyes and without looking at me said, "That's a circle, fairly late to the game here. Probably getting buried, but oh well." I decided to end working on homework and arose from my desk searching for my phone. I probably wanted to relax and lurk or do something else of the sort. It was dark in my room, so I couldn't see anything. I then thought, hey, let me grab my phone here and use the flashlight to try and find my phone. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight as well as the light in the room, and spent a good 5 minutes looking for my phone. With my phone, I finally decided to look at my hand, and was disappointed in myself for the rest of the day. Story 50. Well, it was last year and there was this girl, we'll call her Optimus Prime. So me and Optimus Prime had been talking for a while, becoming closer and better friends. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Until one night we're talking, and she recounts the time we were on the bus, hit a bump, and she flew out of her seat, and landed on me. We share a laugh, then she tells me she had a crush on me back then. Little did I know she still did. So we're talking some more, and we get into a bit more suggestive topics. Neither of us were single at the time, yet we started flirting. Well, her best friend just so happened to be my girlfriend, and things happened. So long story short, I did what I said I never would and cheated. It ruined the relationship, my self-respect, and my joy for a small bit. That's the biggest mistake I ever made. To my ex, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that and messed up. TLDR, I cheated on my girlfriend with her best friend. Story 51. Touching hot things. The dumbest one I can think of. I was out on my dad's farm doing some slashing. Big mower dragged behind a tractor and a bit of wire got caught around the blade. And so the clutch between the do and the slasher started slipping, getting very hot. It was literally smoking. I touched it wondering, I wonder if this is hot. I can confirm it was hot. Not so dumb, but in hindsight very dumb. I was in the tractor at work, doing the same tractor work for the last week. Look around and sick over on the left side there's a cigarette lighter. So I push it in them, pull it out a second later, and wondered if it was hot. So like the Mr. Bean's European Vacation, I touch my finger to it. Yes, it was very hot. Story 52. I can't brag with being particularly smart. However, my sister with a PhD in trade law can. She had been gifted a pepper spray by our mother when moving to a bad part of a new city. They're not legal, but it's not a huge offense to have one on you in Denmark for self-defense. She then went on a trip to London and forgot to remove it from her purse. Flying to London it wasn't discovered. But on her way back she came across a bin for discarding items you can't bring on the flight in the airport. She looked through her purse and figured that she should probably dispose of it before going through the security check. A security guard saw this, and with it being considered being equivalent to a semi-automatic weapon in England, she was detained, put on a terrorist watch list and forbidden traveling into England for 2 years. Roughly 2 years later she worked at an oil company and had to travel to their HQ in London, which luckily went off without a hitch. Story 53. My mom would leave notes around the house to remind my sister and I about stuff. There was one post-it note that I discovered in our bathroom cabinets that said something along the lines of keep toothbrushes in cup and keep toothpaste separate. I was a pretty smart kid from the start, but I didn't want my mom to misunderstand, so I took a bright blue marker and wrote on the back of the post-it note, "Dear Mom, I got this message," or something like that. It was blue marker, so you couldn't read anything my mom had written anymore. I had no idea why my mom was so frustrated. Story 54. I am 24 years old with an amazing credit score. I am financially responsible. I go to counseling. I work on myself as a person. I have long-lasting relationships with people, which requires humility and work. I consider myself to be an all-around, good, responsible, smart human being. But I got into a relationship when I was 18, that lasted 5 years, and I bought a house with my partner, still dealing with the disentanglement after our breakup. Most ridiculous decision I've ever made. Story 55. I'm not a tea drinker, but was asked to make a cup of tea. Couldn't understand the point in the teapot, so put the tea bag in the kettle. Cut out the middleman. Apparently this is bad. Story 56. I put an electric kettle on the stove. I was visiting my boyfriend and he had an electric kettle, whereas in my house we had both, but we mainly used the normal one that goes on the stove. It took me a minute to realize because after something smelled burnt and the water didn't heat up I realized my mistake. I wouldn't say I'm smart, but I'm not so stupid that that's a common occurrence. Also I'm studying to become a professional chef, so really not my proudest moment. Story 57. I went to work once accidentally, of course, with 2 completely different shoes on my feet. On the left there was my usual backwork shoe, and on the right was a light blue trainer. At work I feigned to co-workers a limp on my right leg, saying I had a toenail removed. They asked why I didn't just wear the same shoes on either side and I said my doctor suggested this. I don't know. If it's better tomorrow of course I will. Story 58. When I was younger, I pondered for days about how I thought I knew the secret to breathing underwater. It made perfect sense in my head. Finally decided to test out my theory while taking a bath because I was really confident. Cue instant sputtering coughing. Only then did I realize it was incredibly dumb. Also, I had heard once, probably someone else yanking my chain, that if you squeezed an egg with equal pressure all around that you could squeeze as hard as you wanted and it wouldn't break. I'd never done it but somehow believed it 100. So one Saturday morning while my husband and I were making breakfast it came up, and he did not believe me and told me I was insane. Well, I'll show you. Yeah, there was egg everywhere, including on my face. Story 59. The worst I had, I was in training in high school doing Tier 3 tech support for Time Warner Cable, and an email came up something like Therapist Amy. I said out loud with several people around, excuse me, what if we get offensive email names we have to repeat? Mine says the Rapist Amy. My trainer came and looked and said we wouldn't have to repeat them out loud, and by the way, that is Therapist and not the Rapist Amy, sir. My trainer on our smoke break came to me and started busting out laughing and said it's okay, but that was hilarious. Story 60. After taking a shower, I couldn't remember where I left my undershirt. I spent a good 5 minutes looking for it. Turns out I was wearing it the entire time. Story 61. Sometimes, in the morning after I wake up, my brain will go to autopilot and it'll just get in a shower, no matter what time it is. I've done this maybe 3 times. One was at 4 in the morning, another was around 6, and one at 2. I usually have work at 9. Story 62. I was sitting on the patio of a restaurant when a waiter came over to say they were going to open the windows and make it an outdoor seating area. After opening the windows he came back to our table and asked if it was too much sunlight for us, and without thinking, to check if it was indeed too much light, I looked directly at the sun. Story 63. My current car is the first one I've ever owned that has a push-button start instead of a conventional key. It took some getting used to when I first got it. I once met up with some friends for lunch and forgot to turn it off. It sat in the parking lot running for like 3 hours. I was like, when I went out to leave, I am an RD chemist. Story 64. I was watching a movie with a friend who was a film student, and he commented that he liked the tint in which the movie was filmed. About a half hour later, I said, I can't believe they shot this whole movie in a tent. He just said nothing, and I pretty quickly figured out my mistake. But ID spent the past 30 minutes watching Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, and marveling that they filmed it in a tent. Facepalm. Story 65. My daughter's father, definitely the dumbest person and thing I've done, was pretty good though not the best, but pretty good. I was halfway to driving to an ex's house when I realized I was supposed to be going to a current GFS now ex house. I blamed traffic for the delay. Story 66. I do the ordering for my department at work. My POs have an absurdly stupid long order number on them. I need to enter that PO in a program to get the order placed. For 2.5 years I typed out this like 20-character long mishmash of letters and numbers. Never once thought to copy-paste it. I work in IT. Story 67. Mine is short and will probably get buried, but why not? Before school, I go to this one Starbucks a lot. I'm very used to them saying have a nice day, which I always reply with, you too. This one time I went place my order and the barista said, your drink will be ready in a minute. You already know what I said. You too. I still think about it sometimes. Story 68. I saw one of my colleagues at university try this really dumb thing. Once the elevator sensor for maximum weight went off and he tried to climb up another guy in order to trick the sensor. We were engineering students. Story 69. People tell me I'm intellectually a pretty smart guy, but I'm also reckless and impulsive, with untreated ADHD because the meds made me depressed. In the last 6 months I've fallen off a roof, fallen through the ice into a lake, jacked my leg up sliding in baseball in shorts, etc. I'm an adult, I think in my mid-20s, and alcohol was only involved in one of those incidents. I'm not even sure what the dumbest thing I've done was. There's a lot of stupid to pick from. Story 70. My time to shine. College-educated female. A few years ago my sisters and I plus boyfriends went to NYC and I wanted to go to the planetarium. I was amazed, enthralled, highlight of the trip. As soon as we left I stayed with glee loudly, can you believe the sun is a star? Everyone blankly stared at me and started laughing. They thought it was a joke. It wasn't. I somehow missed that fact and I shouted it so others around me could hear. I've never lived that down. Story 71. A light bulb had shattered in my cooker hood extractor fan, so I carefully cleaned up the glass, located the switch to turn off the cooker, and then tried to use a pair of metal tweezers to remove the base of the bulb. As I blasted across the kitchen, I remembered that cooker switch extractor fan switch. Story 72. Making croutons in a restaurant. The woman instructing me told me to mix them with butter and spices in this big plastic container, and then put them in the oven at 400 degrees. After mixing them I put the whole container in while even thinking this can't be right, but okay. Thankfully it just melted in on itself, so I just ruined some bread and was able to cover my mistake, she laughed. Fellow cook, not a boss. Story 73. Went to a restroom of a movie theater. They had very fancy wash basins. Mistook them for pea pods and was getting my out. Guy beside me was stunned and said WTF dude, never told anyone. Story 74. Recently I visited Naples with my mum, and we arrived late at night after a long flight. We paid a taxi to get to our apartment only to find out the owner had changed our reservation, and we had to go to a different building. It was like 2 a.m., everything's closed, no one in the streets. Anyway, when we arrived at the right building, after about an hour trying to figure out where the room is, we get in as I later figured out some Metro theme apartments. I thought it was the metro station and I was so confused it had maps all over the place and I thought we had to take the train to get to the room. My mum still makes fun of me about it. It's not that funny written down. Story 75. I did a work term at a music store in high school, put my coffee mug that was metal in the microwave and ran to do something, blew up the microwave and smoked out the back room. Dude was pissed he couldn't heat up chili.